have to stick to time because we've got people in the next session who are doing it remotely. So if I appear brutal, forgive me, it's not my natural way, of course. I'm normally quite cuddly and soft. But rather than go asking you to introduce yourselves, because that will consume a large amount of time that we've got, I thought I'd kick off with some questions. So, and in the course of answering the questions, you could obviously you're going to explain a bit about your company and your background and so on. So, Alastair, if we start with you, could you give us a bit of context in terms of how the age verification industry as a whole has developed, and perhaps give the example of your company, how it handles a straightforward age check against government-issued ID?
I can indeed. So my name is Alastair Graham. The other one? How's that? Can you hear that? Yes. Okay. So I'm Alastair Graham. I'm the CEO of AgeChecked and also the co-chair of the AGEify. Okay. I believe there's some slides. It might help, but we'll be quick.
Okay.
So the history of the age verification industry in 2 minutes. So it really, I think you could say that it started around the time in the UK that people were discussing how to do age verification for adult websites, pornography in particular. At that point, people started talking about, thank you very much. People started talking about age verification being something separate to a subset of identity, because we weren't purely looking at sort of the age attribute of an identified person, but we were starting to look about how could you anonymously verify somebody and just use their name. So we're probably talking about sort of 10 years ago that I would say that the industry actually started. The terminology at the time was age verification. It has morphed into... There we go. It has morphed into the word age assurance. At the start, we were talking about verifying people's either their personal details using ID, which was the traditional way of doing it, but we started looking at ways of, okay, how can the industry age of somebody without necessarily knowing who they are. In the UK, we were using this sort of the telco data sets where you could have phones that were unlocked, and you could ping the mobile, you could ping the phones to find out whether it's unlocked or not, i.e. are they over 18 or not, without knowing who they were. We were using methodologies using credit cards, which in the UK are sort of 99.9% issued to over 18-year-olds. Driving license we used as well, using sort of personal information, but also algorithmic checks on driving licenses. So that's where we started. It was very much looking at sort of verifying somebody's credentials or getting an age range. And then over time, this has developed into age assurance, because we've added the estimation technology, such as I'm sure you'll be talking about, where we're not confirming a data point anywhere. We're actually creating a data point based on the technology that we're utilizing. I think it's also worth mentioning that we're now gone also beyond purely the sort of understanding the age of somebody, but also adding in authentication, confirming the individual that's providing data is the person they say they are. And I think the next iteration of this sort of evolution of AV is also to around monitoring of the individual, the child or the adult, and whether they're abusing the system, and making sure there's anti-fraud measures. That's my
Great.
Quick run through of
Wonderful.
AV.
When the online safety bill was going through Parliament, you're right, essentially the phrase age assurance became the dominant one, but what government ministers said, and of course it's in the end it's Ofcom that will make these practical determinations, was age verification was, if you like, at the top end. So if there was a high level of risk associated with a particular activity, then age verification would be a requirement. Quite how that will, what the difference will be in practice is another matter, but they did make that sort of theoretical distinction between age assurance for certain lower levels of risks, an age verification will be required for higher ones. We've yet to see how it's going to work out in practice. So, Kostas, can you tell us a bit about alternative ways of doing it that don't rely on government-issued ID?
Did you want me just to very briefly go through that particular?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Go on then. Sorry.
Okay, so this is something that's fairly common, I would have thought, to everybody on the panel in terms of how you can capture a government ID and create an age attribute to it. Effectively, the providers will create a hosted environment where somebody will be able to look at, mostly it's nearly always on a phone, be able to look at the phone, provide their documentary evidence, such as a passport or a driving license. That information is captured. It can be cross-checked against government databases, and also the image of the individual can be compared to the image on the government-issued photo ID for a comparison. There's liveness checks that are generally introduced to ensure that somebody's not just showing a picture of their older brother. And then effectively all that information is coalesced in order to provide a solution that sort of gives a very high level of assurance actually as to the age of somebody. So this is particularly our technology. We can do this in over 200 states, over 900 different types of documents, and cross-check it across the globe in sort of roughly 50 countries for database analysis. So as every month goes by, there's more facility to cross-check. But this is a solution that I think will be probably common to all of us.
Yeah. Okay, sorry for the misunderstanding earlier. Okay. So, Kostas, alternatives to government-issued ID?
Okay. Thank you, John. Yeah. Well, to be honest, I believe that we are using at AGEify, because I'm the CEO of AGEify as well, an age verification provider, just like the others. We use more or less the same methods as Graham has, Alastair had just mentioned. We have been working, though, on this vouching mechanism for a long time now. It's been more than 5 years that we have started working on the vouching mechanism and the referral process, as we call it, so that we require 2 or 3 adults to vouch for another individual. That one we extended now to get the age of a minor, so a child, based on the information from their parents. And I believe that this is something that will help enormously in order to cope with the problem of how do you identify the age of a young person. I trust that the work of my colleagues here in age estimation is very good, but there are cases when even that age estimation is not 100% accurate. We rely a lot on this referral process, as we call it, the vouching process, where somebody who has the valid information can vouch for somebody else. It's more or less, if you extend it a little bit, it's just like the physical check that we do in a post office or somewhere else. It's just like the checks that we do when we go somewhere and we present a document, and then this person is verifying that, yes, indeed, you are the one to of this method. So this is a method that we strongly believe that in the future it might play a very good role in trying to establish the age of an individual. And now, on the other hand, at AGEify, we put a lot of attention in what I just described before in the single sign-on process, the smooth usage of the internet without having to re-authenticate, re-prove yourself again and again. We believe that we're moving to a usage, to an internet usage that is not limited to a single site. We believe that users are moving from one system to the other constantly. So there must be a way in order to properly get that age that has been once defined, and get that age and use it across the websites that we are visiting, so that the user has a smooth experience, user experience across the internet. And I believe that our work in that direction is very good. We are confident that with the use of protocols, interpretable protocols like EU consent, we'll be able to offer that solution across the internet. When we're referring internet, we're not talking about web browsers only, but also mobile applications and everything that is around that. The idea is that you create, a session, let's say, your session across platforms, just like the omni-channel marketing. We're trying to use the term omni-channel age definition.
Great. And we're going to have a standards body that's going to tell us if these things are actually doing what they claim to be doing. So, Julie, facial recognition and age estimation. Facial recognition, hardly out of the news. Every day there'll be a story about it. And so tell us a little bit about what you and Yoti are doing.
Thank you. So actually, just on that phrase, it's actually facial detection and analysis, and it's crucially not a facial recognition. So it is a facial technology, but it is not a recognition approach, not a one-to-one, like when you open your phone, or not looking at one face from a whole room. So I think just winding back, we're a company that has built reusable digital identity approaches, and everyone across Europe is going to have some form of a reusable digital identity wallet through their government in the coming years. You already see this in about 8 countries around the world. So that is one of the approaches we offer, enabling you just to share from your reusable app, say an over 18 or an under 18 or an age band. But then we saw that people weren't always comfortable using something that was derived from something that was government issued. Either they were nervous, they didn't have it with them, they didn't want to use that. And every one of the methods that we've all talked about all has circumvention risks. So if you're not document trained and I show you a document and you don't have technology, if you're not sort of border force level, you really won't be able to make a good judgment. So with any document, you have to look, is that really authentic? You have to look, am I actually alive? Am I the person actually in this document? So you've got to look at document authenticity, liveness, am I a live person, not a 3D image mask or whatever? And this is actually my document. So back to that point you made before about verification always being higher. If I'm just uploading something, it could be a Legoland driving license. And not actual a real document. Or it could be Alastair's Legoland driving license. Or it could be one that someone's got off the dark web off you or Andy. So all of those elements are important with what's so-called in the verification sphere. So just flipping through with a few of these, what we've seen is exactly this, that yes, you need the authenticity, you need proof of ownership, but also you need that liveness if you're looking at the document approach. But what we've seen from now nearly way over 600 million age checks is that even those people that have access to a document, actually, when we see this across multiple sectors, are actually preferring and voting with themselves to use an estimation approach. And we see that pretty much in 80% of the cases across every sector, that is the choice that people offer when given several. And with that, there is the liveness element. Yes, it has to be independently tested. Yes, you need to look at the bias. And yes, you need to look at the injection element as well. But how is it built? Lots of faces with month and year of birth. You feed that lots of times. When it sees a new face, it says, is this a live face? So not a bot or a mask. Does the analysis on a pixel level and spits out the age at the other side. And crucially, the image is instantly deleted. So that is the thing that differentiates this from a recognition. There's no database that's created. And you can see through the white papers that us and other organizations that provide facial age estimation have published. You can see the exact bias levels, but you look at sort of 1 to 1.5 years for people, say, under 20, and 2 to 4 because we look after ourselves more or less well as we age. And here's just one example you can see of the stats, and we publish exactly how good it is across men, women, light, mid and dark skin tones, so exactly you can see very transparently what the levels of bias are. But crucially, it's detecting and seeing what can you find out. It's not the one-to-one, it's not the one-to-many. And there will be a global benchmark of this coming out soon from NIST, where they'll be looking at many millions of images and benchmarking different organisations against that. Where is it used? So lots of different instances can be on terminals, can be on premise, and it can go through lots of regulatory hoops. And thanks to the work of Tony and others, there's a lot more of that review starting to happen. Here are just a range of the organisations that have already opted for that approach across social, across law enforcement, retail, gaming, adult. And we'll share slides via Ian if anyone wants to see some of the use cases, but from are you actually over 18 in a social environment, through to are you 13 to 17 in a teens area or 18 plus. Other approaches, such as with the document-based approach, are you under 18 to report an indecent image? Similar ones for vaping e-commerce online, and also examples in store. So that's a quick whistle-stop tour, not wanting to overstay our welcome. Thank you very much.
But just let me ask you, because obviously my use of language was less than perfect, but presumably you found the whole argument about facial recognition, as it were, pollutes and makes explaining what you've just explained extremely well here that little bit more difficult, or needs much more careful marketing or explanation, put it that way.
It does, absolutely. Now, I'd say in the UK, where over the last 5 years since the Digital Economy Act, we've gone through that with journalists. Yeah. Absolutely. The US, we're getting there, but it is always something that people are worried about. Is this a unique recognition? Is the image instantly deleted? So that's where the work of organisations such as ACCS, to audit bodies to see actually, is this image deleted? Is the bias what they say they are? And the work of NIST looking at benchmarking is also really key.
Great. Andy, so you've got an even newer way of doing this. So perhaps you could tell us about you and your company. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Yes, I'm Andy Lulham, COO of VerifyMy. One of our solutions is VerifyMy Age, a multi-method age assurance solution. Lots of methods available: identity document scan, facial age estimation, voice age estimation has previously been mentioned, along with a number of other methodologies too. Firstly, I'm going to mention what I think needs to be the basis for all age assurance solutions. Firstly, proportionality. I think it's really important here. You don't need a sledgehammer to crack a nut. The use cases we're talking about are not opening a bank account, not opening a gambling account. That requires a KYC check. We're referring to assessing, accessing certain types of content on social media platforms, accessing pornography, buying a bottle of wine. The solutions need to be proportionate to the use cases. We shouldn't restrict the methodologies available or the ones that can be deployed on such use cases, or we risk lowering the level of adoption, I think. And secondly, friction, or more specifically, a lack of it. We have to innovate, and regulators have to work with the sector to ensure low or zero friction methods that are also robust and accurate, of course, are acceptable. If we mandate only methods where people need identity documents, for example, we again risk making the problem worse. Adoption rates will be low, drop-off rates will be high, age assurance will not be commercially viable, which is really important, and the problem would simply be shifted elsewhere. Which takes me nicely onto our new email address method that you mentioned, John. So we offer platforms a new age assurance method using an authenticated email address. Email addresses have pretty much 100% penetration, as it's highly unlikely that a web user who needs to prove their age or their age range won't have one. And it's very inclusive for that same reason, in that it doesn't discriminate at all by race or gender or skin tone or any other factor. And it's also truly global, so any email address can be processed whatsoever. And the solution's also zero or minimal friction, depending on whether a platform we integrate with has an authenticated email address as part of a user's account, or whether the user needs to manually input and authenticate the email address as part of the flow. It's highly accurate, and it's been certified to EAL level 3 by AgeChecked certification scheme, who we heard from earlier, and returns a result in just a few seconds and can handle tens of thousands of requests concurrently. In terms of, I guess, a little bit more about how it works, or rather I'll start by saying what it doesn't actually do. Just to be clear, there's no access to an email account itself, and the solution has absolutely nothing to do with how old an email address is. That's completely immaterial. Instead, the tech can build a digital footprint upon which statistical analysis can subsequently create an age profile of an individual. It's built to be conservative with age estimation, meaning it will not return a result if there's insufficient information in order to build a clear picture or a clear age profile of an individual. So it can be deployed as part of an age gate, which prevents access to a website in its entirety, but perhaps performs best when it's integrated with a platform that carries user account information. So it might be a social platform or an e-commerce site, and can therefore perform the check in the background without the end user having to actively engage with it. And it's becoming increasingly popular for that reason. So going back to my first point about proportionality and customer choice, it's great that the industry is, continually innovating to provide lower friction, higher convenience methods such as this one. Thank you.
So just so I'm clear about that, so it depends upon whoever issued the email address having themselves done some sort of authentication first, and you only accept into your system, therefore, presumably,
So you cut.
email providers who've done that. So you wouldn't, an Outlook address wouldn't count.
Yes, no, so just to be clear, we can perform the check on any email address with any domain.
Yeah.
In terms of what I meant with authentication,
Yeah.
so if we are working with a platform where their users have accounts, and part of that account information is an email address, and part of that account setup process required that individual accessing that email account, clicking a one-time password and confirming ownership, then that is enough evidence that the email address is in possession of the persons who we are performing the check on. If that's not been happened, so for example, if you are manually inputting an email address to access a pornography website, a bit like a mobile phone check, a one-time password is triggered to that account. The user must prove that they have the login credentials and access the email account to confirm ownership and authenticate it.
Okay, I think I've got that. So Stefan, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Stefan, there you are, I could see you. So you're going to talk to us a little bit about obtaining parental consent through different mechanisms and processes. Go ahead.
Consent and control. Just to understand my voice, I'm suffering from corona, so I can't be with you, unfortunately, and you have to stand my voice. We are not the same. I mean, if we talk about hardcore content like pornography, it's no doubt that we need age verification or age assurance. But JusProg, what is an NGO from Germany, we are more to the more soft content. So that means for ages like 12 or 16 years old, not the really hardcore stuff. And so we make mainly parental control and link to this also parental consent. And what we do is more to believe in communication between the kids and the parents. For this, of course, is needed. It's a solution comes, the JusProg solution in this case, comes to the device of the kids. But then what the latest is, what we build it and what we continue making better is a communication tool called JusProg Manager. That means that we try to start a communication between the child and the parents. Parents might also be guardians, teachers, or whoever takes care of this child in terms of media, and that the kids can ask their parents, I would like to go to this and this website, and that's the reasons why. And the parents can decide to say, yes, okay, I allow it, or I don't allow it, or maybe I allow it only for an hour. And then if the parents are at work for this time, for example, and let's talk about this in the evening. And for this, of course, we need our filter list that in the beginning, the website is blocked, so what might have harmful content. And then there starts this conversation between kids and parents. That's what we very much believe in. It's not really about hardcore stuff. Of course, will be difficult. It's a child asks the parents, I would like to go this or that porn site, and the parents say, okay, let's talk about it. But if you talk of movies, 12 or 16 years old, computer games, or some other types of content, we think that we really need more communication about this. It's the latest what we do.
Great.
You can try this already with the JusProg Manager on jusprogmanager.com. And so to see how this communication runs.
Yeah. Ian, we've got a question in the chat. Go ahead.
Yep, so some questions from online. I'll fire through them if I may.
Yeah.
I think the first one is probably for Julie. Are you concerned with AI-generated images as a way to falsify verification? And if so, what are the solutions given that this is becoming more and more difficult to differentiate between an AI-generated image and a real one?
Absolutely. I think all of the companies in this area understand that we're in an arms race. We've been in an arms race against fraudsters for the last decade, and every year that arms race continues. So we've done work, for example, with NIST2 in terms of liveness detection and attain the NIST2 level where on 1,000 attack vectors, you have to basically get 99.9% and withhold those. And continually, the bodies that are doing benchmarking and auditing in this area are going to put more and more different challenges in. Injection elements, AI generated, the landscape will just keep innovating. I don't know if anyone else has any other angles. And there's also some work I think that you're aware of that might be kicking off, or is that too early to mention, Ian?
Yes, yeah, there's a project which has been jointly funded by the Swiss and British governments to look at specifically defending against AI attacks on age estimation and age verification. Another one for Kostas, perhaps. This is more about EU consent in general. Is it correct to understand that we had a good pilot, but it's not yet market ready? And if that's correct, could you provide a timeline for when you expect it to be available?
Difficult question. I think it's part of our phase 2 project, right? Yeah, technically speaking, we can say that we are ready, even though, yeah, we would like to upgrade the technology because it's based on the old EIDAS protocol. On the other hand, it has been showcased during several months and with thousands of users. So it's something that we know that it works. Production ready, I would say close to. But this is why phase 2 is there, in order to make it production ready. And phase 3 is to upgrade the system to a new technology.
Thank you. And for Andy as well, this is from our colleague in Ireland, Jennifer Dolan. Is the email address solution more intended for confirming that someone is who they say they are, as opposed to verifying the age of someone?
No, absolutely not. No, it is an age estimation solution. It creates, utilizes many hundreds of different data points and creates a digital footprint, which in turn some statistical analysis can then create an age profile of an individual. And that age estimation technology, as I mentioned, has been passed through Tony Allen's AgeChecked certification scheme to EAL level 3. As part of the process, you also authenticate that that email address belongs to the person who is conducting the checks. That's what I meant by authentication, to guarantee that the email address that you're checking is the person that the age check is being performed on.
Thanks. And then probably just time for one final one, although I'll just draw people's attention to what Rachel O'Connell has put in the chat about the way that Trust Elevate does age verification, because we're a very ecumenical team here, and they have an innovative way of doing that as well. But for Kostas on vouching, from Martin Sass, how do you think this method would work in practice? How would vouching people be selected? Isn't there room for potential fraud if the vouching people are not trustworthy? And ultimately, how does this method affect the user's autonomy if they need to rely on other people vouching for their age? Quite a big question, but perhaps a short answer.
I'll start with the first one, with the first question. Yeah, vouching obviously is relying on the on the ability of the voucher, the person that is vouching for the other, to be correct, let's say. There are multiple methods. If you look at the identity space overall, it's the same concept in reality. When you invalidate a person that has given vouch to others, you immediately invalidate all the others that have been verified based on that method. And this is the way that we have implemented actually ourselves. There is a patent actually in the US for that as well, in the identity space. Now, the second point, the second question was about the usage of that system. Well, it's one method. So it might be the only method for some cases, but it might be one of the multiple methods in other cases. So we're not forcing users to use the vouching method. We're just saying that this is something that can be an option in case that the user doesn't have an ID, a formal ID, doesn't have a bank account, doesn't have a credit card, doesn't have all those methods that the other, all the providers are offering. So I believe that this is something that in the future, it might be one of the options. We are thinking as well of a typical case, apart from age, we're talking about the whole identity. Imagine the immigrants that arrive in Europe lately in mass. It would be a very good way to try to understand their identity based on vouching of other persons that have their own identity. So overall, we believe that it covers a big part of the population, not a big percentage, but it's a substantial amount of people that would have a problem on that, on providing official documents in terms of identity, and in terms of age assurance. I believe that it's something very useful, especially when we're trying to identify the age of kids.
Thanks. I think that's all the questions we've got time for. But just one point. The key thing about interoperability is you only need to find one of these solutions that works for you, and then you should be able to use that check anywhere. And that's the goal.
Presumably the point of that last question, though, was if that was the only method that was available to you for the reasons that, for example, Kostas just gave, you just arrived in Europe or whatever, and you didn't have anything else, in a way you're being deprived of your own agency because you're having to rely on somebody else agreeing essentially to help you out. Yeah, I get that.
And inclusivity.
Allow me to interfere a little bit here, but I know that in some countries, in order to get an identity, you need for somebody else to vouch for you, even in front of the police officer. Okay, so it's a method that is already in use across the world. So.
But you're right, the point is there are going to be a multiplicity of different methods of doing it, some of which will be the only ones available in some cases, but if in others it won't be. Great. Thank you very much, panel. Thank you very much indeed. So,